Hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here, welcoming you to another fun yet certainly controversial video. Over the course of years now, we have slowly been looking at every single Ninja Turtles video game ever published, even taking a deep dive look at many passionately made, high quality fan games. Out of all of the official entries in the series, one game is often heralded as the greatest of all time in the series, with that narrative rarely being challenged. The game I am of course referring to is none other than Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time, the high quality arcade beat 'em up that was first released in arcades in 1991, then later converted for the Super Nintendo the following year. It is now considered the stuff of legends, and who can blame people? This game is absolutely amazing, and was released in an era where the popularity of the franchise was at an all-time high. Everybody here is aware of this game. While this may be the case, personally I feel that another game has snuck beneath the radar that not only stands up to this gem in gameplay quality and art direction, but even in terms of historical significance, which we shall soon get to. So without further ado, let's look at the history of this criminally under-celebrated title. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of the 2007 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles beat 'em up. Yeah! When it comes to the world of gaming, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise has a huge legacy, but when it comes to such games there is no doubt that the most praised are beat 'em ups of the late 80s and early 90s. This style of play seemed to climax with the god tier Turtles in Time, with Turtles games past this point seeing a shift in play paradigms. As the classic era slowly drew to a close, we would get the likes of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighter, which hoped to cash in on the success of Street Fighter 2, and the Metroid-like Radical Rescue for Game Boy. Due to franchise fatigue, the Turtles brand, including TV shows, movies and video games, would experience a long cooling off period, with everything finally being rebooted in 2003. The new animation style for the TV show would be more in line with the Eastman and Laird comic books that the franchise originated from, with this new era ushering in more games from Konami. On the handheld side of things, we would first get a 2003 game simply titled Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which had beat 'em up elements but functioned more like a traditional side-scroller. The game was fun but nothing like the arcade classics. The following year would see its sequel, Battle Nexus, a game with similar play featuring the heavy inclusion of stealth elements. This was another decent offering, but once again drifted even further from Turtles in Time. Battle Nexus would be the last Game Boy Advance Turtles game developed by Konami, closing off a historic run indeed. But what would come next on the hardware would be one of the greatest Turtles games ever made. The 2007 game would once again simply be titled Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, adding to the extreme chronological confusion that the series brings. This title from Ubisoft would see the return to the classic beat-em-up arcade style of play for the first time since the 16-bit era, offering up something truly special in the process. Before we dive into discussing the awesome gameplay mechanics that this title brings to the table, let's first acknowledge the change in art direction from the previous Turtles games. Not only is this game produced by a different development house to the Turtles games that came before it, but the sprites in the game are based off of an art source different to the 2003 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles animated series. This time around the game is graphically inspired by the Turtles 2007 CGI movie, the first feature-length film from the Turtles franchise since the live-action trilogy from the early portion of the 90s. This was the first ever Turtles movie to feature computer-generated imagery and would premiere in cinemas 14 years after the last movie's release. The movie would end up being a commercial success, grossing $95 million worldwide off of the back of a $34 million piece. As a piece of media, this movie would receive negative to mixed reviews with only a 34% approval rating on the website Rotten Tomatoes. So bearing in mind that this was a far from universally liked feature length, it is not surprising that a bloody video game based on it would manage to fly so far under the radar. I mean, games based on movies have a terrible track record anyway, as usually they are rushed to market to see release in line with the films they are based on. So, odds were, the average gamer would not be expecting much from this game, especially bearing in mind that the Turtles were not the powerhouses of the 80s anymore. With a game based on a CGI movie, it is common for developers to make games based around them using pre-rendered polygonal sprites. See the 16-bit Toy Story games, for example. So, looking at the box art, as a consumer, I would be expecting this game to have graphics more in line with the likes of Altered Beast, Guardian of the Realms for the GBA hardware. Instead, we get beautiful, colourful, traditional 2D sprite work, packed to the brim with amazingly smooth animation frames. A case could be made that this is the most stylish looking Turtles game that has ever been produced. Throughout the game, there are cutscenes featuring movie screenshots accompanied by text that push the game's story along, in which mirrors the movie source material that this fantastic game is based on. When the game proper kicks off though, you take control of a turtle as you begin to brawl your way through the city streets. I can't emphasise enough how much I appreciate the art direction of the game, but it's the beat 'em up mechanics in which I want to highlight now. You will notice as you satisfyingly whack opponents with your weapon that your turtle is capable of comboing moves together, which is made all the more satisfying through the application of a combo counter being present within the right hand top corner of the screen. In terms of moves that are executable though, options are much deeper than Turtles in Time or anything that came before this. It is possible, for example, to tap the B button and execute basic combos, and tapping the D-pad in various directions it is also possible to vertically and horizontally launch opponents and perform back attacks. And with one button taps, the Turtles can grab, throw and perform jumps, and pressing A and B together allows for sweeping kicks, jumping kicks and head stomps. Further to this, the Turtles can even do wall jumps, and multi-tap inputs can be used to roll and even use rolling kicks. Using the Game Boy Advance's shoulder buttons, players can also perform cooperative moves, and pressing them both together at the right time, our heroes in house shells can even utilise unique super moves. When I say this is the depthiest Turtles beat 'em up yet, I am not exaggerating here. Traversing the streets for Turtles can take out opponents and pick up money that is dropped by enemies, or destroy some objects that are part of the stage to find items to replenish health or pick up usable weapons. You know, typical beat 'em up stuff. As progress is made through the first stage, action leads underground, whereby moving subway trains can act as interesting hazards during play. This continues to help the game feel like a living, breathing world. Action eventually progresses back above ground, whereby motorcycle riding opponents come into play, another classic beat 'em up trope of old that was certainly a much welcomed breath of fresh air in 2007, in an era whereby we were severely starved of games like this. At the end of the stage, a boss fight occurs against Hun, who can shoot rockets using his rocket launcher, or jump into the sky raining rockets from above. As a breather between stages, the Turtles are brought to their hideout, where here players can access their trophy wall, which is basically the game's achievement system. An awesome and rare feature for a GBA game, and a brilliant little touch to add to this experience's replayability. Turtles in Time certainly didn't have anything like this. Players can also access an area above their hideout which acts exactly like the shopping district within the classic River City series. Here players can talk to NPCs, accept challenges from characters such as April to earn more money, but more importantly spend that hard earned beat 'em up cash on upgrades, such as equipment to increase stamina, defense, strength and more. In fact, there are loads of stores whereby characters can buy food to restore health and all sorts. Again, this area channels Kunio-kun games heavily, and is a welcome addition within a Turtles beat 'em up for the first time. Moving into Act 2, which can be accessed via speaking to Splinter, sees the Turtles begin their next quest by brawling on rooftops. The best way to describe a lot of the action in this game is like playing a living, breathing comic book. Speaking of which, it brings back memories of playing Comic Zone here and there, which is pretty radical in itself. Standing this game side by side with that classic, this title cleanly beats that one though in terms of gameplay. Action moves onto a construction site, then soon into an industrial area with both backdrops featuring a range of foot soldiers to take down. Progression through this scenery just features plenty of much needed satisfying brawler action, which is just what any gamer would want from any of this really. Action heats up though when eventually players are forced to face off against Karai, who, apart from being able to duplicate themselves and teleport, have the most complex varied attack patterns of any adversary in the game as of yet. Act 3 sees Raphael back on the streets in a stage known as the Kidnapping. The setting soon changes though as our hero enters an American diner, whereby even NPCs can be seen drinking coffee in the background. In fact, more intelligent non-playable characters can be seen cowering under tables, wisely hiding from the destruction and violence that is unfolding in front of them. In the diner's kitchen, players must take on the quick and nimble Jersey Devil, who is tougher to hit with blows than any opponent's encounters as of yet. These varied boss fights certainly add to the overall challenge of the game. Moving into Act 4, players hit the streets once more, taking on foot soldiers aplenty as a quest takes place to storm the castle. Once inside the villain's keep, there are new respawning enemies to do battle with, including these recurring axe-wielding maniacs. There are also these Shoryuken throwing robot-like things who are satisfying to break, amongst as usual a variety of fragile things to smash to grab weapons from and other objects. At the end of the act, gamers must destroy the monster containment unit, which is being protected by wave after wave of enemies. Once it is obliterated though, players are brought back to the hub world before they are ready for the 5th act. Act 5 sees the turtles slashing and brawling their way further and further into the castle. There is even a section that functions identically to a classic beat-em-up lift section, as after all, would this even be a classic beat-em-up without a classic lift section? The next part of Act 5 sees the turtles in a boss battle against Max Winter, as players draw closer and closer to the end of the game. Act 6 sees some really cool gameplay unfold, including brawling that takes place atop a moving truck, just like in Super Double Dragon. The development team who made this game certainly done their research when ensuring that they were going to make the most beat-em-uppy beat-em-up possible. Speaking of beat-em-ups, once players disembark the truck, brawling takes place along a waterfront with the Statue of Liberty in the background, with the setting harkening back to one of the stages in the classic game Final Fight. I feel like this title often pays homage to so many different greats. After defeating the sea monster atop a moving vehicle, the final act features some of the toughest recurring enemies in the game as of yet. The stage obviously offers a gauntlet of stronger foe who must be vanquished before finally doing battle with the game's last boss. The final opponent is General Aguila, who is obviously also the main antagonist from the 2007 movie. The encounter brings everything you would want on the table, a long drawn out encounter whereby players must chip away at the enemy's massive life bar. Again, as one would expect, this combatant has a wide array of moves designed to test the player in this final challenge. But after landing a final blow, gamers can be safe in the knowledge that they just beat by far the most underrated Ninja Turtles game ever made. Even though games of this genre were largely out of favour around the time of this game's release, the game released on Nintendo's aging handheld hardware would end up receiving extremely favourable reviews. GameSpot would summarise, TMNT on the Game Boy Advance is a rousing beat-em-up and a shining example of a movie-based game done right. The fisticuffs are fun, the presentation is sharp, and the story stays true to the comics and the recent movie without coming across as contrived. It won't take you hours and hours to finish the game for the first time, but the whole experience is so sweet that you'll want to do it all over again every now and then. IGN, who are famous for burying beat-em-ups of the period, would score the game high, writing, TMNT for the Game Boy Advance is one hell of a gaming surprise, coming out at what's pretty much assumed to be the tail end of the handheld's lifespan. It's an awesome throwback to old school game design, but with tons of flair and technique to jazz up the experience into a contemporary piece. It's easily one of the best brawling games I've played in years. Reviews were generally positive like this across the board, with journos being shocked to see this awesome brawling affair popping up seemingly out of nowhere. While many gamers seem to have skipped this one over the years, with a lot of people still not knowing it exists. The game actually plays a much more important role within our gaming history than some would expect. The game was developed by a subsidiary of Ubisoft known as Ubisoft Montreal, who would soon go on to produce yet another critically praised beat-em-up. This would be 2010's Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, a game that would shock the gaming public and gaming journalists alike once more, with a now classic that once again came seemingly out of nowhere to most. Once again, this was a title that was based off of a movie license, with no one really expecting this game to be any good. And not only was this an amazing top tier beat 'em up, but once again it was a fantastic one released at a time when no one else was making them. To put into perspective how much this digital only game was loved, when it got removed from online stores, fans would campaign for years to see it added, and for physical releases to be produced for modern hardware. If you have played both Scott Pilgrim and the Turtles 2007 game, it quickly becomes clear how many mechanical similarities there are between the two games, with in some ways the Turtles game almost being a Scott Pilgrim vs. the World Zero, which is certainly nothing to be ashamed of. With the rise of modern beat 'em ups, and further success stories such as River City Girls and Streets of Rage 4, we have another Turtles beat 'em up currently in the making. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. Apart from paying homage to the classic era of the franchise, and the likes of Turtles Arcade and Turtles in Time, more relevant to this video is that the title is being developed by Tribute Games, a Montreal based company featuring multiple team members who worked on both Turtles 2007 and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. So if these aren't the elements that are required to result in a game that delivers beat 'em up bliss, I don't know what is. All I can say reflecting back on the day is that while Turtles in Time is often coveted as the greatest Turtles game ever made, I urge you to give Turtles 2007 a try, as this game has enough amazing elements that it should certainly be in the conversation alongside that game, as a strong case could be made that it is even better. But for now, I shall leave that for all of you to give your thoughts on in the comment section down below. So with that said, I guess, ladies and gentlemen, that was the story of 2007's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles beat 'em up. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, ring that notification bell, and be sure to let me know which criminally underrated game that you would like to see on here next. Videos like this covering games that no one searches for is partially possible due to the generous people who back my work on Patreon. So special shout outs go out to A Murder of Crows, Carl Johnson, Heo Paulo Lopez, Nostalgia Collector, Ben Harradine, Corey I. Marsh Sr., Ryan Dinch, Evan Border, Philip Namph, Azra Rarakai, Dropkin Varela, Michael Calix, Ego, Jordan Durant, Ian Boyle, Nick Daniels, Princess Sana, Daniel Daly, Computer Man, House of a Ted, Gary Pinkett, ECU Professor, Johnny Holly, August Piazza, Justin Wang, Capcom vs SNK, Hermes Gonzalez, Manshovel, Michael Hall, Sang He, Norma Stitz, Langston Miller, Noob, Sarah Powell, Flame It Renee, Marvin Araliga, TOG Driver, Lewis Viant, John Bates, David Bale, Chris Fisk, Rick67, Antonio Rodriguez, Craig Jenkins, Synth Spaces, Punk Toast, and everybody else who backs my work on Patreon. Thank you very much indeed. Cheerio.